Hi, I'm Emilia.
And I'm Yvonne. Together, we wrote a book on female friendships, and boy, do we have questions.
We're here to continue the conversation and help women to navigate, cultivate, and celebrate female friendships.
This is Girl Friendships.
We're here recovering from the heat in sunny Toronto, but we shan't complain because other people are experiencing a barrel in different parts of the world. So we're going to be grateful as we launch into this very, we don't want to talk about topic, which is conflict. Emilia.
Yeah, that literally puts together my thoughts on conflict, which is I was not looking forward to filming this episode because I tend to be so conflict averse, so conflict avoidant. I don't even want to talk about the theories around conflict. That's how much it stresses me out. So yes. Yeah, but I think it's so crucial to talk about. It's so crucial because as women, I find that there is a bit of a pattern where we don't address conflict, head on. We kind of skirt around things in our female friendships. So, I think it's a really important topic, but it was not one I was looking forward to.
Well, because I like to make trouble. You mean, what if I told you that, you got here late and you just ate up all my food and I don't like that about you?
Yeah. Okay, so my stomach's turning.
Already.
And I can feel the sweat coming in my forehead.
Right.
And
as soon
I wasn't late for the record.
Yeah. She was not late for the record.
But I did eat all her food.
We all ate. We all ate. So let the record show that we all ate. But we're dancing around this, and I find myself dancing around it because personally, I really don't like conflict. I think I mentioned in a previous episode that whenever there are, where there's shouting or loud voices raised, I retreat to my little girl self, except I'm a big girl now, but I want to get out of there.
Yeah.
And in the book, I think we talked, or maybe in a book, I've written too many, we talk about my relationship with conflict because it sets me back to my childhood where there was, sometimes major, sometimes physical conflict and fights in our home. And so I just remember Mom always, whenever the fights happened, she would always say, "Where are my kids? Where are my kids?" And as long as we were behind her and she could protect us, then whatever conflict she could deal with the fights. So maybe my tendency when there's conflict to run.
Oh yeah,
that's what I wanted to do because I was exploring it and going, where did that come from? I think that's where it stems from. So every time somebody raises their voices at me or they speak, there's a little girl in me that wants to kind of run and hide.
Yeah.
Of course, I've learned better since, but I'll share that later.
Yes. And actually, so, speaking about the stress responses, so there's fight, flight, freeze, and then there's also one that I learned in the last few years that I hadn't heard come up in this context before, and it's something called fawn. And fawn just means that you placate. You placate. You smooth things over. You make a joke. You maybe, you maybe watch how that person's feeling, and you think about how to like what to say. Yeah, exactly. How, like, you see that someone's getting emotional, and you figure out a way to speak or do something that will bring down their emotion, and it's called fawning. And you can probably tell by the way that I describe it that this is something that I've leaned on heavily over the years.
It resonated with you, right?
Oh, it really resonated with me because, it's like I've been told before that, like, I'm really quick to apologize, right? And some people really don't like that because they don't think that's genuine, but I genuinely want to stop the conflict.
And whatever you need to do to make that happen, you do.
Yeah, and it's not to say that I'm not genuinely saying sorry, but I think a lot of people think that, there's no way that I could be remorseful in the moment. Whereas I feel immediate remorse when somebody is mad at me because, I like it's just so hard for me when someone's mad at me, right? So I do tend to think about things rationally, and I can always see all perspectives of things. So it's not that it's not genuine, but it definitely comes off that way because I'm just quick to try and resolve the situation.
And the reason why we're talking about it like this, we're getting to the girl friendship part in a while, but I think how we deal with conflict personally, that's going to, for the most part, affect how we deal with any relationship conflict. Except maybe in girl friendships, we're feeling the same things.
Yeah.
But how we respond, it's what's different.
Yes.
So remember we talked about, we surveyed about 110 women for the Female Friendship Guide, the book.
Yes.
And we asked this question around conflict. What do you tend to do when you have a conflict with your girlfriend? And do you remember what the responses were?
Yeah, so most people will think things through and then address it. That was the majority.
Yeah, 54% of our respondents indicate that when conflict arises with their friends, they want to take time to think it through and then address it.
Yes. And I think another 14, 15% just address it head on. And then another 15% ruminate on it and don't act.
Ruminate means they just sit there and stew?
Yeah. They just think about it. They agonize over it. Once again, you can probably tell by the way that I'm talking about it that this is something that's been a pattern of mine in the past as well. And I've really tried to become more forthcoming about, conflict, and especially in female friendships. I don't know why, but, this is something that you and I have talked about. But we, as women, we do tend to treat conflict a little bit differently in our female friendships than we do in our romantic relationships. Like in my, with my husband, I have no problem saying, in the moment, hey, that bugged me, or hey, I didn't like that comment, or whatever it is. I have no problem addressing right then and there how I feel. And
so you don't fawn?
No, I don't fawn. I don't freeze. I don't, and I wouldn't necessarily say I have a fight response in a romantic relationship, but it's just more okay, let's talk about this. Let's address this. Here's how I'm feeling. I want to learn more about how you're feeling in this. And for whatever reason, I'm just so much more rational and forthcoming in those, in that relationship. And that's always been true of romantic relationships that I've had in the past. I just had no trouble with that. But with girlfriends, it's we have this expectation that our girlfriends can read our mind, or that we'll never have conflict, or that things are always going to be good. But, things come up and feelings get hurt. And, sometimes you really need to address things and talk about it. And we tend as women to have that tendency not to address things as much with our girlfriends.
Because as you're talking, I'm thinking about my pockets of girlfriends, and we've known each other for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to go back in my head. Now, there is such a thing as revisionist history, which, when you revise a history, you're never cranky or miserable. Everything is tainted with this lovely glow.
Yes.
But I can't recall any significant conflict with a girlfriend. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there weren't things that bugged me. Mm-hmm. So you're right, because I find for myself, I will deal with conflicts with my husband, or if, my children or whatever. With girlfriends, I think it goes back to that thing, man. We did not sign a contract.
Yeah.
To say you are going to be my good friend and I'm going to hold you accountable for bad behavior. Now, that said, I really don't know where we internalize, or maybe it was never modeled for us, that you could have conflict with your girlfriends and it be okay.
Yeah.
But I know the part of me that does not like conflict. You talk about a fawn response. I think I do an anticipation response, which is, if I see something brewing, I will put things in place to make sure it doesn't come to a head. And I can psychologically read people enough. I know I'm doing it. I'm working very hard inside to head off this thing I see coming.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you call that.
Would you call it hypervigilance?
Hypervigilance. Well, I'll let the word sit in the air.
Yeah, sounds
but
good.
I'll let it sit because it's part of what we're trying to do in these discussions is to keep it real and be authentic. But I think I work hard, especially when there are relationships that are a little bit testy, or I can see that somebody is getting a little bit hot under the collar. But if it blows, it blows, and when it blows, I will, and the people, usually when it blows, it's not around me. It's around something I see happening, let's say with you and another friend.
Yeah.
So, personally, when the rubber meets the road, and I'm sitting here thinking, I will deal with it, but I'm going to have to crank myself up.
Got it. Yeah.
But I have decided, I've learned in life that just certain things, you can't sweep them under the rug any longer. You can't do the hypervigilance or whatever it is. Fawning is not an option. We're going to deal with this, and we're going to deal with it sooner than later.
Yeah.
So I will take the time to think it through, but I will make a decision at some point, because if a principle has been violated in my mind, we got to deal with that, right?
Yeah.
Sooner than later.
Yeah. And the reason why I use the word hypervigilance is once again, something in my own life that I realized for myself is I found myself in the past, I would call a friend because I knew that if enough time went by, she would be mad at me for not calling, or something along those lines. So I've experienced that kind of tendency in the past where, I would think about a friend almost literally because my anxiety was going up around them potentially getting mad at me. So, and I've worked so hard over the last 5 years to not do that, to just call my friend when I want to call my friend, and not because I'm trying to avoid someone getting mad at me, because I find that, we all have some easygoing friends that you can call every 4 months if you want, and, they're never going to get mad at you or even be hurt by that. And then there are other friends that are a little bit more high maintenance. And I found that I wanted to be more intentional about how I cultivate my friendships, and also even how I use my energy, right? Just because I have more energy doesn't mean that I should give it to someone that makes me anxious, or I worry about them. So yeah, it's kind of that's why I bring that word up.
Okay. So in terms of conflicts with your girlfriend, if you're listening, what do you tend to do? Are you the kind to address it head on, or ruminate, stew, and don't do anything about it? You just stew and get an answer. Or do you, tend to just take some time to think about it? Because we want to get into the section. Or by the way, Jessica, do you have anything to say on this topic?
I'd say I pretty much avoid conflict as much as I can. I used to be more like you, Emilia, where I would notice certain friends have certain things that they want, so I would do them because I know if I don't, then blah blah blah. But then I just one day said, why am I doing this in order to force a relationship? Because it's not the same if it was on the opposite side. So then my sort of avoidance in conflict was really just, let me see how people treat me, and I will act accordingly. I can't say that I necessarily have bad friends or things like that. I have a lot of strong friendships, but our friendships are so strong that even when we're in conflict, it's usually over something small.
Interesting.
The big things we're kind of all on the same page about already. So it takes less to have to be hey, this is how I'm feeling.
Interesting.
Because we've established that for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jess. Because I'm trying to think, like, what would be something that would be like a significant friendship breaker for me, or to cause me to have a big fight with a friend. The ones I have in my close circle, like, I have not been at that spot yet where we've gotten to there. We have different views on things. Well, that's just different. So I'm not going to argue politics with you. If I know that we have different views on politics, I'm just not going to go there. Why would I bother? It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
But let's say I'm thinking of something that would be really embarrassing. Let's say you have a habit every time we are going on our trips, like, you never pay. You're always missing.
Yeah. Always
When the
forget
bill
your wallet at
comes.
home.
When the bill comes, I mean, is it a conflict? But it's a thing that you have to address. So I think I would say, hey, I paid for the last 3 meals.
Yeah.
It's your turn. Is there a reason why you're always missing? Like, you need to pay.
Yeah.
Or tell me in advance that you can't afford it, so I will go someplace else.
Yeah.
Just don't do it.
Yeah, that's
Some
totally
of us
fair.
have difficulty even engaging in that conversation. Or what if I showed up for someplace late and you're one of those on-time people and you start yelling at me? That would be like, that would shut me up.
Yeah. So that's definitely not a trigger of mine, but I can tell you that, my approach, if I had a friend that, every time we went out together, she didn't pay and she expected me to pay, like, over time, I would probably just not make plans at a restaurant with that friend. Right? So that's
So that's avoidance.
like, okay, so I know. My avoidance is like, ooh, it's so hard to avoid my avoidance. It pops up all the time. It's like a whack-a-mole in different situations.
What is this dynamics? Why can't I address something with my girlfriend with the same boldness? Is that the word?
That's the word.
I would for my other relationships.
Yeah. So, one example I'd love to give is I feel extremely comfortable addressing conflict with my sister. And I think that, as I've considered that, I think the reason why is because we are sort of committed in a way, right? Like, she's always going to be my sister. So she's not going anywhere. So kind of back to your point about what you said with a spouse, like a spouse, you sign a contract, right? With a sister, okay, you didn't sign a contract, but essentially you were kind of born into the contract.
You were to love me.
Yeah, you were born into the into the contract in a way, right? Because you're tied whether or not you want to be. And for both of us, like, she also feels really comfortable, addressing conflict with me, and we always are able to address things, talk things through, and then move on, right? Like, we don't go back to stuff, and when I reflect on why that's possible with my sister and, like, maybe not some other girlfriends, is because I have that safety of she's not going anywhere. She's not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I do wonder if with some friends, we just wonder, okay, if I say this, will they just stop talking to me, right? And so I think that's a big part of it. And the other thing that I've realized too is so as a super conflict avoidant person, if I've addressed a conflict with one of my friends and that was really, really hard for me to do, and their response was not one that was, like, empathetic or compassionate or, working to find a compromise, like, if they just kind of
brush it off.
Brush it off or ping pong an argument back at me, or, I get the message that's like, okay, that was really difficult and there was no positive result from this. So we're just going to back this one up. We're going to reel this one back. Like, because what I have noticed is there are friends of mine where I can talk about things a little bit more openly and easily. And I also find that those are the people that have been responsive and compassionate to my concerns in the past. Because as a super conflict avoidant person, I just don't see the point of raising a conflict with somebody who's not going to
be dismissive.
Yeah, who's going to be dismissive, or they're going to say, "Oh my gosh, yeah, you're right," and then keep going back to doing whatever it is that they were doing.
But
yeah.
Let me interject, because I know we've gone down this road and we've made some assumptions.
Yeah.
About conflict. In your opinion, Jess, you could jump right into this. What would you consider to be the definition in your head? What's a definition of a conflict?
Yeah. A definition of a conflict for me is when I'm upset by something that my friend did, and that's
You want to just leave it at that?
I mean, yes and no, because there are different kinds of conflicts. So sometimes it's just, okay, your friend has one personality, you have a different personality, kind of like what you were saying about being late or this person being punctual. So there are those kind of arguments. And then there are those, so almost like personalities.
So is there an assumption that it's dual in a conflict, Jess?
I feel like for me, like, conflict is when, like, conflict with a friend would be, I have a set of values and expectations with my friends. They have a set of values and expectations with their life as well. Some things are more important to me than they are to my friend, but we get into conflict when one of those roles, expectations, or boundaries is not met. Because someone has to cross a line in order to get into a conflict with somebody else.
Then, when does it become a conflict? When it bothers me? Because something could bother me that doesn't bother you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So are we in a conflict?
Yes.
Because that's why I say it depends on I would say it depends on your situation. If it's not a big deal to you and it's not a big deal to the other person, that's not a conflict. If it's a big deal to one person and it's not a big deal to another person, that's a conflict.
Yeah.
If it's a big deal to both people, it's still a conflict.
Right, but it could be a conflict.
It doesn't have to matter to both people for it to be a problem.
Yeah.
Well, I understand that. But I'm thinking conflict, I think warfare, there's two parties, and two parties disagree and we're going to fight it out, right? That's kind of where my head wants to go. But there could be a conflict where the other person could, case in point, I remember one day, a couple of years ago, Dennis was downstairs working, and Dennis is my husband, by the way, and I went to ask him to do something or whatever, and then he says, "Oh, I'm not talking to you." And I'm going, "You're not talking to me?" And he goes, "Yeah, you did such and such yesterday, and I've been upset." And I'm going, "You have?" So there he was. I said, "You mean you're down here stewing all this time, and I've been living my happy life?"
Yeah.
No.
Unbothered.
Right. Unbothered. And I said, the whole point, if you're going to be miserable, like, did you want me to be miserable too? Because I had no idea you were down here stewing, right? So in that case, the conflict was one-sided and unaddressed. So it's only when I'm coming with my la self to go, you can go, "I'm not talking to you." And I'm going, "Why are you not talking to me? What did I do?" So there could be a problem that, if not addressed, could lead eventually to a full-out conflict. But many times we suck it in, we don't address the issue, and I think that could produce a long-term conflict. So I don't know if
Because that builds resentment.
Yes, because it builds resentment. It's like, whatever. But if we don't air, well, we may want to talk about when you air things, but if we don't talk about the stuff that's bothering us and it accumulates over time, then you've got a full-blown conflict. But conflict, what do you call it? Conflict could be one-sided until we disclose that.
Absolutely. Because as you say that, I think the definition for me that comes to mind is a conflict is when there is something that happened or didn't happen that is affecting your feelings about another person.
Relationship with
Yeah.
a person. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's how we could define it in this context.
Okay, so in that case then, with a girlfriend, let's go back to the example. We should go to the restaurant again.
Yeah.
You have not paid for your meal. Suddenly you need to go to the ladies' room or whatever, which is, you think I'm stupid. And this time, I have asked for separate bills while you're gone. I'm not covering you today, right?
Yeah.
Because I want you to deal with this issue.
Yeah.
But let's say, you came and, what? You didn't pay the bill? And whatever. Like, now we're having a full blown out, in the restaurant. Now, as soon as you start shouting at me, of course, I'm going to shut down. But I've paid my bill, so I'm leaving you. You can go wash dishes.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's an example of a conflict that it accumulated over time, and tonight it came to a head.
Yeah. And the way that I would look at that too is that the first time, your friend didn't pay their bill or they disappeared when the bill came, well, it's not a problem because it happened, right? So it's like, it's not even that it accumulated, but I do see what you're saying with the accumulation, because we do tend to get frustrated, I think, when there's a pattern of behavior and a pattern of treatment that happens, right? Because once or twice, it's not a big issue if it kind of balances with not doing that thing. But if it doesn't, then it becomes a pattern, and that's a problem.
And I'm thinking, because if I get the bill this time, usually in my head, my rules are, you're keeping some kind of mental tab, and you'll get the bill next time, because that's kind of, it's the give and take of friendship.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, that would make you a matcher.
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
But actually, Adam Grant's book did say that most people kind of end up veering, whether they're a giver or a taker, end up veering toward matcher.
And the matcher definition is?
The matcher is exactly as you said it, where you kind of keep a bit of a mental tally of how much you give in the relationship and how much the other person gives. Right. And Adam Grant said, well, specifically what he said was about working relationships, that people tend to be like that at work. So maybe they don't give over their entire inclination, but at work they tend to become matchers, because that's just the kind of like the judicious thing to do, right? Like, you're not gonna do things for your colleague that never does anything for you, right?
I do think that we bring that into a relationship.
Yeah.
I have a good sense of fair play. And I am prepared to err and feel virtuous about it. So let me own that one with my chest. To having a little bit of an upper hand. I'm going to outgive you. I'm going to outkind you. I'm going to, you know what I'm saying? Just because it puts me in a place where I'm not in a deficit.
Yeah.
So it's a control thing. So when I see a friend who is taking advantage of that, so fool me once, fool me twice. What is it? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
And I would say, it's probably not even a control thing on your part. I think it's just a comfort thing. You just don't feel comfortable when there's any chance of a deficit in a friendship. And so you kind of head that off by giving more.
Yeah. And we talked about that in terms of giving and receiving in some other episode. But any kind of bothersome detail left unaddressed for extended period of time. I mean, how long can we ruminate and stew without it starting to impact our relationship with our girlfriends?
It would pretty quickly.
So what would we suggest to people who are listening? Maybe y'all out there are, how do you deal with conflict in your own girlfriendships? We've kind of been all over the place today. And, I think where we're going to end up to say, we will deal with it if we have to. Yeah. The mature Yvonne knows that some things have to be fought out and I won't shy away from it. But if you're in a season when things are a little bit cranky with a girlfriend, then, think about what is it that's making it difficult. And is it something recent? Is it accumulation of grievances? And I think at some point you're just going to have to sit your girlfriend down and say, hey, I've been going through a lot of things recently, and, I am not happy kind of how I'm feeling in this relationship, whatever your words are, but find a way. But I just suggest, for me, I like to write things out first before I speak them, so I could get it out of my chest, so I'm not saying wounding words to people when I talk to them. But that's what I would suggest. If you have a conflict, then get it out of your system. Write it. So what is it that's bothering you? And maybe write out what resolution that would be good. And this is to head you up, to let you know that we're going to talk next into what if you've tried all these things and it doesn't work. Because our next episode, we're going to talk about, is it time to break up?
Yeah.
But anyways, it could be that when you write it out, for me, I find the writing out helps me to air it, and then I could see it, and then I could take responsibility for what's mine. Because sometimes in my quest not to get into a fight, I will suck things in or whatever, right? And not deal with it just because I want peace.
Yeah.
Which is probably more important to me than the stuff. But over time, it builds.
Yeah. And what I would love to share, just kind of sort of a recap of what we've talked about, but also my advice based on, the hard lessons that I've learned about getting better at conflict so that my friendships could get better and stronger. So number one, like we talked about how our pasts can affect our relationship with conflict. So I think it's helpful to make yourself better aware of what your relationship to conflict could be, so that you start to see your inclination more clearly. So then if you say to yourself, oh, that's not a big deal, I don't want to talk to my friend about this because, I was just probably having a bad day or something, and if you're somebody who tends to intellectualize things or always like sweep things under the rug and then build resentment over time, it's helpful to look at that tendency so then you can be more honest with yourself about whether or not you should address that conflict. Because at the end of the day, honesty, when done with, compassion and thoughtfulness, is kind. And it's not kind not to tell your friend kind of what's hurting you or pulling you away from them. It's not kind to do that. And so sometimes we don't say anything because of our own comfort level and not because of how the person will take it. And so that's the advice I kind of wanted to leave everyone with on this.
And Jessica, any final words?
I think that if you have a conflict with someone, you need to address it, ideally within 24 hours after you've cooled down.
Yes, definitely cool down. It's a good idea. Right.
So in our next episode, we're going to ask the question, what if you've tried addressing conflict and your friend is dismissive, they don't take you seriously, or that little old thing, why you worry so much about it? Or they're just like, they've not been kind back.
Yeah.
So the accumulation is getting to you to the point where you don't necessarily want to be around this person anymore. So breaking up is hard to do. Tune in next time when we talk about breakups. Ouch. You've been listening to the Girl Friendships Podcast with Yvonne and
Emilia. Thanks for listening. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.
Leave a comment, please, to let us know your thoughts.
And come back next time for another episode of Girl Friendships.